This first doctor's prescription will be the first in a series about the problems and shortcomings besetting the Joint Strike Fighter, or JSF or F-35. In this first examination, we'll look at the kinematic performance of the fighter and see if the claims about the fighter's performance according to Lockheed Martin and the Department of Defense stack up. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, has variously said that the kinematic performance doesn't matter. And the first you will know that if you're an enemy fighter, that there's a JSF in the area, is when the enemy has an AMRAAM flying up its arse, quote unquote. Something we will look at in another doctor's prescription. The AMRAAM is an air-to-air missile. On the other hand, they became extremely defensive when confronted with a significant downgrading that they had to request on both sustained turn and transonic acceleration requirements. The United States Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, the body tasked by Congress to ensure that weapon systems that the United States is purchasing are fit for purpose, stated in the 2012 report, and I quote here, "The program announced an intention to change the performance specifications for the F-35A, reducing the turn performance from 5.3 to 4.6 sustained Gs, and extending the time for acceleration from 0.8 Mach to 1.2 Mach by 8 seconds. These changes were due to the results of air vehicle performance and flying qualities evaluations." End quote. Lockheed Martin trotted out one of their test pilots, Billy Flynn, who either knowingly lied or was ignorant of the capabilities of so-called legacy fighters, which are third or fourth generation fighters, not the much vaunted fifth generation of that supposedly the Joint Strike Fighter is. And this is something else that we will examine in a later episode. Flynn stated in the February 2013 edition of Flight International, and I quote again, "The F-35 is comparable or better in every one of those metrics, sometimes by a significant margin, in both air-to-air and when we hog up those fourth generation fighters for the air-to-ground mission." End quote. Further in the article it states, and I quote again, "Lockheed declined to compare F-35 performance to clean configuration fourth generation fighters, saying that such comparisons are irrelevant." That brings to mind Mandy Rice Davies, who quoted in the Profumo affair, "He would say that, wouldn't he?" The fact is, the JSF is limited in its internal weapons load to AMRAAM missiles in the air-to-air configuration. In close, they need infrared guided missiles, which for the JSF means hanging them out in the wind, which would make the aircraft accelerate and turn more slowly. In order to test the veracity of the claims Lockheed Martin make, we'll compare a number of fighters with the F-35A, the highest performing variant of the Joint Strike Fighter and the model Australia is getting. The other versions of the Joint Strike Fighter, the B and C models, are notably worse. The JSF sustained turn at 15,000 feet, as quoted by the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, is 4.3 G, and its acceleration from 0.8 to 1.2 Mach is 61 seconds at 30,000 feet. For comparison, the JSF will be compared with the F-15, the F-16, and MiG-29 carrying nose stores, which are all fourth generation fighters. Then to that list we will add the nearly 60-year-old F-4 Phantom, which had trouble in competing in Vietnam against second and third generation Soviet fighters. with an air-to-air missile loadout equivalent to the JSF. We will also be looking at the F-15, F-16 and MiG-29 with a similar missile loadout for air-to-air. The performance data for these aircraft come from the published flight manuals for these aircraft. Now, the first thing that we will look at is the sustained turn performance of the fighters at 15,000 feet clean. Now, in this case, on the vertical axis, you have the turn performance in G. And you will see that the F-15 has the highest sustained turn rate of over 7G. The F-16 can do around 6.6G, as can the MiG-29. And of course, the JSF is down at 4.6G. In terms of acceleration for clean aircraft, from Mach 0.8 to 1.2 at 30,000 feet, the JSF takes 63 seconds, the F-15 Eagle takes 26 seconds, as does the F-16, and the MiG-29 takes 46 seconds. So in this context, the JSF takes over twice as long as the F-15 and the F-16. And it takes even longer than the F-22 Raptor fighter. Now let's have a look at the aircraft all loaded up with missiles. The JSF has 4 air-to-air missiles internally. The F-15 will have with 4 medium-range missiles and 4 short-range missiles and a centerline pylon. The F-16 has 4 medium-range missiles, 2 short-range missiles, and a 300-gallon centerline tank. The MiG-29 has 2 short-range air-to-air missiles, and the Phantom has 2 medium-range and 2 short-range missiles. As you can see, all of those fighters, including the F-4 Phantom, have a better turn performance than the JSF. Even the Phantom is able to sustain over 5G, and the F-15 and MiG-29 are able to sustain well over 6G. The JSF languishes at 4.6. In terms of the acceleration, comparing the aircraft loaded up, where the F-15's got 4 medium-range missiles and 4 short-range missiles and a centerline pylon, the F-16 has 4 medium-range, 2 short-range and a 300-gallon centerline tank. The MiG-29 has 2 short-range missiles, and the F-4 Phantom has 4 medium-range missiles, basically the same loadout as the Joint Strike Fighter. As you can see, once again, the Joint Strike Fighter takes a significantly longer period of time than the F-15, the F-16, the MiG-29 and the F-4 Phantom. Even the 60-year-old design F-4 Phantom is nearly 10 seconds faster in acceleration from Mach 0.8 to 1.2. So as can be seen, in no way can the JSF be seen to be comparable to 4th generation fighters in kinematic performance. In fact, it struggles to keep up with a 3rd generation F-4 Phantom, a fighter that was no kinematic standout when it saw service. It is no wonder the JSF was comprehensively outperformed by a 1970s designed F-16 fighter in mock dogfights. The JSF in those mock dogfights was carrying no weapons. The F-16 was carrying 2 underwing fuel tanks, as you can see in the footage. The pilot of the F-16 reported, even with the limited F-16 target configuration, the F-35A remained at a distinct energy disadvantage for every engagement. So the JSF is kinematically absolutely uncompetitive with even so-called legacy fighters, never mind significantly improved 5th generation Chinese and Russian and other fighters.